Hi, Denise.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being a part of the Art of Life project, and thank you for agreeing to have this conversation. I'm really excited about this. So, I'm just going to give everyone a bit of an introduction on you and your work. Basically, Denise studied philosophy and theology in Oxford and basically ended up going into the dance world and African dance and ancestral dance, and now merging both the theological side and the philosophy side, so spirituality with dance, basically. And that for me was really exciting. That sort of inviting people to express themselves and to center themselves through movement and expression and dance. So I'm really happy that you're here with me and your presence is here with us. And welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, great to be here.
So basically, with the Art of Life project, it's really taking a view of what it means to make our life a work of art. And when we actually look at cultivating a life that is indicative of a work of art, what does that really look like?
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be the first question. When you think of making your life a work of art, what comes up for you?
Um, what comes up is this recognition of the creative force of life
Yes.
present in everything. And also this sense of life as a gift and a mystery.
Yes.
So, which feels really similar to making a piece of art, which I feel the process of the artist is like a midwife. It's like birthing what wishes to come through.
Yes.
So being available to hear those little inklings
Yeah.
and let them come through. So to see life as a gift and a mystery, and to approach it in that way of, okay, here's this one that I've been given right now to live through. What is it that wants to happen in it? So that then you stand in that kind of place of, yeah, of the artist that is allowing the bigger part of themselves to manifest. Yeah.
That when you were speaking, I was getting that element of how silence is so important in that process, because
Yeah, yeah.
you're talking about listening to the deepest part of yourself, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, I believe very strongly in the importance of remembering who we are, not just as this particular physical manifestation, but the the whole planet that we're part of, and the whole spiritual dimension that we're part of. And so, the listening turns out to be listening to the wholeness of who we really are.
Yes.
And then this particular manifestation has a certain job to do, or even job's not quite the right word, but yeah, has a role to play.
Yes.
In the what is coming through of the totality.
That's an interesting part of, or certainly a part of your work that actually grabbed my attention, was the ancestral work that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're talking about the totality, I'm getting a picture of that ancestral work. So how does the ancestral work sort of relate to making your work your art? Because we're looking at the fuller picture then, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, one thing about the tangible knowing of the lineages of ancestry that have gone before you,
Yes.
automatically gives you this much bigger time frame that
Yes.
you are looking at life from.
Yes.
And then this particular bit of life is the bit that's alive right now, and then it becomes even more like, I feel like it gives me permission to be more playful in this life, because everything's so much bigger. And then from the perspective of my ancestors, I'm always the child, and I'm always the one trying things out, and that kind of thing of being creative and exploring what's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you tap into your ancestors in that sort of process, basically? Because I'm getting a sense of an extended timeline when you speak of ancestry in that way. But how does one access that in that sort of, creating an artistic life, or making their life their art?
Yeah, I have particular practices that I do that I've been given by different people at different times, different objects that connect me with my ancestors.
Right.
like prayers that I would speak to my ancestors. But
Right.
also, I also work a lot with movement, and I work a lot with connecting people with the back of their body and thinking
Right.
your back as being what connects you to your ancestry and specifically your kidneys.
Wow. Okay.
So you can kind of get it in your body,
Right. Okay.
bodily felt sense of those who came before.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also the sense of ancestry re-manifesting that idea that nothing leaves the system, so that your ancestry is re-manifesting all around you in all of the living life
Wow. So that's
around
quite
you.
fascinating. That's really quite fascinating because I've never thought about it that
Okay.
way. It's kind of that idea that basically energy never dies. It's always basically being
Yeah,
transformed, and when you actually link it to ancestry in that way, that's quite beautiful. It's
yeah,
kind of reforming of your ancestry through you, basically.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So when you think of making your work your art,
Hmm.
what comes up with that? Because your work is art, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's kind of like asking an artist, what does it mean to make your work your art, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, your work is whatever you're engaged with doing in this life.
Mm.
And so to make your work your art is really, again, that sense of listening to what is it that you're supposed to be. There's some
Yes.
things that just kind of go ting, and
Yeah.
that's like, I'm supposed to be doing that. And it could be, it might be something really deep and profound, it might be something very playful, it could be extremely ordinary, but it's just like, ting, that's the
Yes.
thing I'm supposed to be doing. So for me, it's that quality, so that it doesn't become, here's my life and there's my work, and I go off and do my work and I come back to my life. It's like it's all part of one thing, and the whole thing is a mystery, actually. And so we might as well explore it and see what's in there and feel it and inhabit it. Yeah.
Yeah, that I was getting that so strongly when you were talking about that, how important it is to explore,
Mm,
because we can very easily go what we would consider the safe route. It's kind of like um, this happened and that happened, and so I ended up doing this. And when
yeah.
it comes to work, there's so many stories that are very much along those lines, kind of
Yeah.
like people just fell into something, and
Mm,
it's not quite the fit. But basically, when they looked at the practicalities of their day-to-day life, they just made it work.
mm,
Whereas what you're describing as that sort of ting moment is like
mm.
really comes from exploring, and it really comes
Yeah.
from actually opening yourself to be vulnerable to the unknown, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And knowing that you can do that from exactly where you are at any moment. So
Yeah.
even if you're in one of those jobs that you fell into and it doesn't quite fit, you can still find, okay, what is it I'm supposed to be doing in here?
Yeah.
You can still transform the situation that you find yourself in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's an element of that when you speak of that where I actually think of nothing ever happens by chance.
Yeah.
So basically everywhere that you are, you're there for a reason, and there
Yeah.
is a fit for a reason.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can be so dismissive of that, and so we fail to see the reason why we're
Mm,
actually there. It could
yeah.
be, I mean, we could be there just to say you're in something that doesn't fit, and this is what it feels like for something not to fit,
Yeah.
and like you need to move on from that, and that's a lesson in and of itself. But there are times as well when it's about exploring the dimensions of what you're in as well, the sort
Mm,
of dynamics of where you are, basically.
mm. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's reflecting something back to you that you need to learn.
Yes.
Sometimes there's something actually that you're supposed to be bringing into that it's like actually it's a ripe situation for you to bring something in.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's an opening up and a sort of development of your own self within that process,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at making basically making your life your art, and you look at tapping into your inner artist and inner creator,
Mm.
and for you that expression of dance is so such a paramount embodiment of who you are.
Mm.
So tapping into the inner artist and inner creator, what's your go-to places for that? It sounds like you probably have many.
For me to tap in, for me personally,
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
I find I get a lot of that from being out on the land, and I live
Mm.
in a very beautiful landscape in one of the. I mean, you can't really call anywhere in England wild, but I think Dartmoor is probably one of the places that gets towards that.
Yes.
And it definitely feels like the land is still speaking. So, I find if I go out on the land, whether that's just walking or just being out on the land, or whether that's actually being in movement practice on the land, then it's like, it's so easy then to just drop into that place of presence and holding, and also that lightness about the little details, because it's so easy to get caught up in the little details, and to be able to just go, okay, let's have some space around that.
Yes.
And that's the place where the listening becomes possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting such a view of like shamanism in that, in what you were saying. And shamanism to me is just is a word to describe that connection to the earth, and that kind of really rooted kind of connection to nature and the earth. So it feels like that's basically where a lot of your inspiration is coming from, that kind of connecting and rooting yourself.
Connecting and rooting, yeah, it is a lot of it, and also really opening up the possibility of what that might mean and what that might look like, so that it doesn't have to always be serious. It might be really playful sometimes, so that it's really just, the practice I do is really about opening up the palette of what's possible, so that then it's more easy to find the right thing when you've opened up all the possibilities.
So tell me about the possibilities of playfulness then, in that connection.
Sorry?
The possibilities of playfulness in that connection. Because you mentioned it doesn't necessarily need to be serious, but it can also be playful. And sometimes when I think of that sort of connecting to the earth, there's an element of kind of rooting yourself and just experiencing that connection, that energetic connection with nature. But there is always just like a slight element of seriousness to it, if you see what I mean. So how do you bring the playfulness into that?
I mean, for me, it's like if I'm connecting to nature, then I'm connecting with the it's very specific. So if I'm with a particular rock, then I'm with that rock. If I'm with a particular tree, I'm with that tree. So I find that the work it's that thing about opening up the whole palette is also reflected in the whole palette of the seasons.
Yes.
Nature. So there are some times of year when it feels like it's just very much about resting, it's about depth, it's about that kind of deep water, sort of ancestral, wide, spacious mystery.
Yeah.
And then there are times of year like the springtime and the summer that feel it's much more about growing and new and what's possible, and this is happening there, and so actually what the land is giving me at that time is quite playful.
Right. Yeah. So I'm getting a sense of the different textures and flavor of nature. In the midst of all of that, because the nature that we connect to in the depth of winter is really different to the nature we connect to in the summer, and it feels like you're kind of opening yourself up to sort of the variances and textures of that experience, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I'm really with this. One of the real gifts that I feel I've received from engaging with dances from African diaspora, especially the dances from Africa, actually, is about this thing, how things that are sacred can also be celebratory. And I think it's very easy to think that if something's sacred, then it has to be serious. Yes. And actually, our celebration and our joy is actually very sacred, empowering, important, part of our health and well-being. So that also feels part of that mix.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the African dance, and what really drew you to that in terms of that expression element of your work.
I mean, as you said at the beginning, I went and studied philosophy and theology at Oxford, which was amazing. Yeah. And but I think I couldn't feel the reason to follow a path that was about being academic for academic's sake, or for doing something that the purpose of it was about earning money. Yes. And instead I followed my heart, and when my heart took me to Devon, and I've always loved dancing, and then I came across people doing African dance here in Devon, and it was just like, Yeah. My body was just like, yes.
One of those ding moments that you mentioned earlier on, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
It must be kind of, because I always think when you look back, the person that was in a very academic space suddenly, where you are now in that very artistic, expressive movement, that there's a joyfulness when I've actually come across your work as well. It feels so different, these two elements of you, basically. And I'm getting that thread from that conversation that we were having, where the exploration is so important. um, when you were actually studying philosophy and theology, did you have a concept of yourself as a dancer in the way that you are now?
No.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I
Yeah.
love dancing. I've
Yes.
always loved dancing.
Yeah.
I didn't even consider the possibility, actually, that
Yes.
that
Yeah.
could be what my life was about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
So there's been a huge opening out, basically, from that
Yeah,
person that you are to this expressive artist that you are right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I feel that there's been a journey of like, when I left Oxford and went to Devon and joined the African Dance Company, in my thinking self, I'd gone from one extreme to another extreme.
Mm.
And I feel like since then I've been finding out how actually
They both
they're not two different things, really.
Yeah.
They're both concerned with the truth of life,
Yes.
and they're both concerned with being integrity and being in the center of yourself and being available. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
one uses the mind, the other one uses the body.
And
What a
it's
great
also what you're able to notice as well, because from everything that you're saying, what you would bring, the perception that you would bring, and the awareness and the mindfulness that you would bring to the dance experience will be hugely flavored by the spirituality and by
yeah.
the philosophy that you've learned. So there's a depth to what's going on that otherwise probably wouldn't have been there, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
that's the beauty of it, really. That's the beauty of what I can see with you when I actually interact with your work in that way. I have to say, Denise, I've actually really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being a part of this. You've got
Yeah.
such a glowy spirit, and it's really, really lovely to interact with that. So thank you.
Welcome. Yeah.